This is the BEnergyAware Podcast. Hi, and welcome to the BEnergyAware Podcast, where we talk about meditation, self-healing, creativity, expression, and living your dream. Special attention is paid to being aware of energy in everyday life and how this awareness helps us to live our dream consciously. This podcast also explores high sensitivity, helping people to learn more and to find out about the sensory processing sensitivity and a highly sensitive trait. I'm your host, Bran Katanec. William Allen is now the author of 2 books about highly sensitive men. He has already been a guest on this podcast, so I'm going to put the link to that episode in the show notes as well. Urgency, when it comes to waking up and stepping up, is something William and I have discussed in this one. Stepping up, even if it's uncomfortable, giving our contribution, however big or small. Here is the recorded conversation.
Now, to your point, Bran, about what you were saying earlier, the urgency is, if you look at our world today, and I mean, even today's news is bad about what's going on in the world, is that we need to wake up. We're on a one-way trip here if we don't stop and take assessments about what we're doing to the planet, what we're doing to each other, the problems with income inequality and so exploitation of resources and all kinds of things. But we're not paying attention to it. We're just kind of sleepwalking. And so the urgency is for highly sensitive people to sort of awaken to their calling, whatever this is for each one individually. But the idea is to start sharing the message about what we're doing to our planet and even to ourselves. These are all correctable things if we pay attention to them. And I think that's what highly sensitive people can do to contribute to averting what I hope is not a final disaster for humanity down the road. And the conversations that I've had and podcasts that I've done, I have really got a strong sense that a lot of younger people younger than myself, are more in tune with that message, right? That idea that we've got to do something. There's got to be some changes made, or else we're on a kind of a collision course with some kind of calamity. And so that's the urgency that I say in the book, is that, I want highly sensitive people to be able to read and accept and embrace the trait, not run away from it. And there's things in the second book that talk about how you can manage the trait, because it can be challenging at times, but to embrace it and to start sort of fulfilling our purpose. And that, I think, is to help the others, if you will. I'm not trying to make highly sensitive people to be special, that they're better than anybody else, but they are kind of specialized humans, and they have a specialty, and that is this ability to pick up the sensory information and to make some sense out of it, and to be able to share that with other people. And so I think there is that urgency that we need to get on with this. And like I said, I see it more and more people I talk to about this. Especially younger people are in agreement that we need to do. They're the ones that are going to inherit the planet, right? I mean, my generation will be gone in about 20 years, 30 years. It's like you say, you need to be aware of these things.
Let's talk about kindness for a bit. How do you see? I'm going to ask a specific question here. How do you see kindness playing into all this that's happening in the world right now, and especially, bringing this new awareness of how we need to change the way we live, the way we do things, and just basically face some things. But how would kindness play into all this?
Well, it would seem that we have a tremendous deficit of kindness in the world, and compassion, which they tend to travel together. Kindness and compassion. And part of that is a lack of empathy that we have shown to each other. And You can see that, especially, in the United States, there's great division right now politically, and you see this people coming in opposition to each other without the empathy and without the kindness and without the compassion, without being able to listen to what the other person is saying. And you see these things. I mean, you've seen it on social media where people blow up in supermarkets or in grocery stores or wherever. It's almost like a rage that is coming out of this person, which is the absolute antithesis of kindness and compassion. What happens is that person will rage out to somebody, and that other person that's directed to rages back. And then you have this sort of fight going on. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's just verbal. And it's like people are watching this for amusement, right? As if it's an entertainment thing. Where's the kindness? Where's the compassion? Why is that person angry? What are they upset about? Why are you angry with them? And that kind of thing. And we've lost our way when it comes to things like doing the simple, kind things that we should be doing to and with each other. And I absolutely think it's critical, because that is starting to vaporize, it seems. You rarely see acts of kindness and random acts of kindness anyway. They're out there and people do this, but it just seems the norm now is to be angry first, to rage out at somebody else, and everything else shuts down. Because what that does is it sort of activates all of the primitive parts of the brain. And this part in the front, where you think and the critical part of the brain gets pushed aside, and we have what amounts to a survival dance that you have with somebody else. They're going to take me down, or I'm going to take them down. And that's, again, kindness is a higher emotional feeling, because it sort of, I guess, engages the empathetic part of us, the mirror neurons, the things that we want to be socially adapted to with other people. But it seems like more and more lately we're sort of short-circuiting that and going with this other fight response, and it is getting ugly. And I think we need to turn that around. That's something that we can do as individuals. That's something that we can carry as a personal mission for every one of us, is to try to show more kindness and make it a conscious act, that you're going to be kind to somebody today, or you're going to show kindness when you would normally maybe react viscerally and at a gut level. Show that kindness instead. That's where that conscious part of your brain kicks in and says, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to stop that circuit play, and we're going to go right into something else that's different, that's more human.
Let's talk about the comfort zone and what that means, and then maybe, expanding the comfort zone, if nothing else. Let's talk about it.
Well, that's something that you hear a lot about. A lot of motivational speakers talk about, like, get outside of your comfort zone. Get outside of your comfort zone is what they usually tell you to do. And for highly sensitive people, a comfort zone has been perhaps their best friend most of their life, is to be in a comfortable place, right? Because sometimes when you get overloaded, when you're overstimulated and overwhelmed, the place you want to be is a sanctuary. And that would be, for most people, their comfort zone. What I suggest in the book is taking a different approach. It isn't like taking the little kid at the shallow end of the swimming pool and you take him down to the deep end and throw him in and say, okay, swim or sink. But the idea is that you take it slowly and you move forward and incorporating experiences that you might not have tried before. So what you're doing is essentially, I guess, letting the comfort zone expand and encompass this new activity, this new thing. In that way, you're expanding your comfort zone, and you're not contracting it and living back and forth between the two. You're just expanding the comfort zone. And of course, that's mostly a metaphor anyway, because there's no place that's, that we live in, like a home, that we call the comfort zone. it's basically doing things that have repetitively done, we know are safe, we feel like we're competent at doing, but without growing our comfort zone, we're not growing ourselves. And without growth, there's death. Whether it's a figurative death or whether it's a literal death, if you don't push that comfort zone out. So that's the main thing. The main message in the book about the comfort zone is to be able to expand it. And by doing it in a way that doesn't overwhelm you, but at the same time grows you and expands you. It's like blowing a balloon up. The more air you put into the balloon, the bigger it gets. And it expands that way. And that's what we want to do is grow the comfort zone. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Like a lot of people tend to treat the comfort zone as being a cop-out, a way of not living life. But I think for highly sensitive people, having a comfort zone is that sanctuary. And that's really important. That's part of the way we're wired and the needs that we have to be able to regenerate, regroup, revitalize. We have to have a sanctuary where we can do that. So I think highly sensitive people tend to be more in their comfort zones. But the idea is that we don't want anyone really to live there and just stay there all the time and never grow. And that is trying to make it more palatable to highly sensitive people to take a shot at moving this outward, take your boundaries and move them out a little bit so you can assimilate new experiences and new things so you grow as a person.
Picking the right life for you. How does one realize what they need to do and what's the right life for them?
That's a very good question. And it's also a question that's very individual, right? I mean, there are all kinds of things. I know through the course of my life that I took interest exams, tests that tell you what your interests are, what kind of career you might fit in and that kind of thing. Strong Campbell is an interest exam I used to take quite a bit to try to help you determine what it is that interests you. But the simple reality is that, and I wrote this obviously for highly sensitive people, but I imagine it would have some application to others as well, is how does it feel to you to be in the environment? I mean, the signals that you must have been getting when you were in that year-long battle with that other thing, a lot of it was coming back as emotional feedback, and that you were not feeling like this is not right for me. Maybe it was stressing you out. Your body was telling you, this is not for me, right? And we're not taught how to listen to that mechanism that we have in place, that our bodies provide for us a feedback loop about whether something feels right or not, something is comfortable for us. Now, there's no career that you'll ever have will have no worries, no problems, no cares. You won't have any challenges. Things won't go wrong, that kind of thing. But there's some environments that are absolutely toxic and for the individual. I know I worked in a few of those. And it. It's like, do you want to go to work in the morning? Are you trying to avoid doing things? Do you avoid talking to people at your place of business? Do you not feel like you're engaged anymore? Do you not feel like you're into what you're doing? You're just going through the motions and so forth and so on. Those are kind of signals that you should be getting clear feedback from your body and from your mind as well, and from the environment around you. Like, for example, for highly sensitive people, let's say, I'm not going to say all highly sensitive people, but I would imagine most would like to have a workspace that was somewhat private so that they could sit and think and whatever. It's not a lot of noise on things going on. But there are some companies, and maybe this is changing now that we've gone through COVID and people have been working at home, but these great big open environments where everybody's cubicle is where you can see over it and everybody's yelling and screaming, the noise is loud, all this hectic stuff is going on. For some people, that would be toxic because you can't work in that. Your brain won't function that way. Now, that's an indication of perhaps a larger cultural issue in the place that you're working where they just don't feel like privacy is a big deal. Everybody's sharing, everybody's doing things, everybody's talking over everybody else. And for some people, that's perfect. They love that. They like the interaction. They like that. And I'm using this only as an example, not just for highly sensitive people, but if there is anything in the environment that you're seeing, whether the bosses scream all the time, whether they're creating high stress situations where it's a feudal, you see sometimes managers pitting employees against each other just for almost like watching gladiator games. Those kind of environments are toxic, and you should know that right away. I mean, as you continue to work it, it's typically not going to get better unless you're in a position to make the changes. If you're a manager or the owner of a company, you can change things. But if you're an employee, you rarely are going to be able to get any changes made. So those are the things I think people need to look out for. It's kind of like your barometer for how the environment is. And a lot of that's coming through your senses. It's coming through your body's reaction to what you're seeing around there. And a lot of times it's just paying attention to that. And at some point, intuitively, you just know, I don't fit in here. This doesn't fit with me. And if you continue to work in the kind of environment that causes you enormous stress, it will affect your physical health. There's no question about that. It did with me. And if you don't do something about that, you'll suffer consequences, whether it's your mental health, whether you get depressed or anxious, or whether or not you have a physical issue like the stress is starting to mount up and cause you all kinds of physical problems. So those are things about picking the right place to work in. And it's funny right now, Bran, because there seems to be, at this current time, a culture where people feel empowered to get up and leave whenever they want to. They can get up and go. When I was coming up, and especially my parents' generation, you work someplace pretty much for the rest of your life, right? You don't move, you don't go anywhere. And even in my generation, there was some movement, but there was some value attached to staying at a company for a long time. Not anymore. So what that means is that it's not so unusual for somebody to job hop. Every 2 years, make a move, whatever. So if you feel you're in an environment that's not good for you, you can leave. Make a conscious choice to go out and find something else. Go find something that works for you, some place that values you and where you feel appreciated. That's part of work that, they don't put a dollar sign to. They don't say, okay, we have an expense here to make sure everybody feels loved and needed, right? There's none of that there's no line for that in the expense reports. But it's a valuable part of a company's sort of goodwill to its employees that they have that kind of mentality where they say, we want to make sure, when they say work-life balance, when they say, we want you to feel at home and feel like this is a good environment for you and a good fit for you, they need to put something behind that and make it real. And if it's not real for you, there's nothing wrong with leaving it for your own sanity. I would urge people, find what fits for you.
Okay, so let's say we're living the right life for us, but there is stuff to face, right? There is stuff to face. It's uncomfortable. We get emotional. We can get overwhelmed, and all those things. It doesn't necessarily get easier, but we do know, okay, this is right for us, but we still need to be able to handle things.
Well, one of the key things, and again, this is especially true for highly sensitive people, is this idea of being resilient, right? When I was talking about the Bell graph before, the distribution of sensitivity, the people on the lower end of the scale are sort of naturally resilient. And the reason for that is not, again, because they're better or worse, it's just because their nervous systems don't process the same kind of data that a highly sensitive person does, okay? And so it makes them more adaptable. They can be in bad environments and be fine. Or they can be in a good environment that has bad things that happen and they're still fine. But as you start moving up the scale, if you will, and this is, again, it has nothing to do with value. It's just going up the scale in sensitivity. Highly sensitive people are affected by their environments much more so than other people are. Now, the key thing about that is, when you're trying to share this message to highly sensitive people about this is a gift. I mean, it is a gift to be able to see these things, process these things, and everything else. But it has to be managed. It's not a gift without a price, and the price is sometimes overwhelm and becoming overstimulated. And so you must learn some techniques and tools that will help you become more resilient. It's not going to prevent you from having the reaction, but what it's going to do is make it so that when you do have the reaction, that you bounce back quicker. That's the resilient part of it. Highly sensitive people are always going to be, at some point, they're going to pick up things, and it's going to be much more of a shock or jolt to them. That's going to probably always happen. But what is important is to be able to be resilient and to be able to bounce back. How much time does it take you to recover? How much time does it take you to come back? So looking for tools and techniques, always emphasize meditation, because I think it's one of the most simple things in terms of learning to do. It's a complicated thing to get down over time, but that doesn't negate the use of it in terms of it's portable. It's always with you. You can do it anywhere. Those kind of things I think are really great. And breathing techniques, when I was doing hypnosis, one of the most important things that I would emphasize with clients is to learn to relax. You've got to learn to breathe the right way, so that you can create this sort of oxidation in your brain by breathing, taking some deep breaths very slowly, very gently, taking these breaths and releasing them slowly. It gets your concentration, your focus on something, and also starts to calm the body down. When oxygen is flowing in, it calms the body down. So these are simple things that people can do. But there are other things too. I did neurofeedback brain training, which I thought was great. If you can find a provider to do that, that's great. There's a lot of companies now that are making apps for phones that you can use, like Calm is a great one. It's got all kinds of background noises and white noise, basically, and things like that, music, etc. Raindrops, thunderstorms, whatever it is that calms you. They've got probably a setup, an audio file for that. And then there's things like Insight Timer, which I use. It's a great little meditation thing. You can create your own kind of meditation thing. And if you can find something that has isochronic or binaural tones, you can entrain your brain to get into a state of relaxation, alpha or theta. And here's the thing about it. Once you learn how to do it, it's not just a matter of practicing a technique. It's also feeling it in your body. Because when you feel that in your body, this is what I would classify as body memory, right? If you learn how to relax and you learn how to meditate to a certain spot, you can call that memory up and you can create that in your body very quickly. So it's not like you have to go through 20 minutes before you get to a relaxed state. You can actually remember that feeling of relaxation. And I did that a lot with my hypnosis clients. Once they had the technique down where they were getting to the point where they could get very relaxed very quickly, I would just say, relax. And immediately they would remember that and they would go into a kind of a restful state. That's what you need to be able to do. So as you had mentioned earlier, it's imperative that because highly sensitive people tend to get overwhelmed much more easily, that they learn these techniques to help calm their brains and calm their minds down. Things are going to happen. Life is going to happen. I mean, and it doesn't always happen the way we want it. But being able to control your reaction to it and not being overwhelmed, that to me helps you focus the gifts of being highly sensitive into the things that it really is designed for, the creativity, the being able to sense things that other people are missing. the being able to put things together, put A, B, and C together that nobody else is seeing. That's what I think is the greatest gift of this. And, you know, as yourself as a musician, it's the same thing. It's being able to see the music in a different way than other people do and create something unique and special that's you, but it's coming through you. And that's being able to, you know, utilize and focus that attention of all those gifts of being highly sensitive.
You as a writer, a gifted writer, what does writing do for you?
Well, you know, it's funny. Most of my life, I had been told that I was a good writer, but I hated the writing process. I couldn't stand it. It was too it was too difficult for me to focus my brain and to get to the point where I could actually write something I wanted to. And I attributed that to just having sort of a lazy brain. It wanted to go wherever it wanted to go. It didn't want to stay focused enough to write some coherent paragraphs and put them together. But when I started writing the blog about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I developed a process of writing for me that allowed me to step through things and write. And then there was this moment when I had to sit and actually create, right? I do research before outlines, all this stuff. And then there would be that moment where I've got the blank page and I'd write. And for me, that became the moment I switched into got into a zone. I got into flow. And once I started writing, it's like an energy that comes out and it flows out and I'll get into it and time will stop, everything. It just keep going until I finish what I'm writing. And I would stop, put it down, and come back the next day. And I'd look at it, I think, wow, that was better than I thought it was going to be, or better than I thought it was when I wrote it. And it becomes a meditative practice in writing because it helps me get into one thing that I've advocated throughout both of my books and all through the blog, is this idea of getting into flow. As a musician, you know that feeling when you're writing music or you're playing music and suddenly it just all clicks and you're off in your own world. You're maybe creating something new. You may be hitting something that you've been working on for a while, whatever it is. The same thing happens in writing. I think the same mechanisms come into play at a creative level. Now, certainly when you're playing music, when you're writing, there are probably some other areas of the brain that get activated because of the different areas that are necessary. But the whole thing is getting into flow. And that to me is like almost addictive. It's getting in that place where you suddenly realize you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And there's a certain level of accomplishment and yet challenge. And so balancing those two as you go through that process is so cool. And so I can't wait to write the next time. That's the thing now, is I got to the point for like a lot of times people who run, jog, and exercise that way, they get a runner's high from doing it. Well, that's the same thing I get when I sit and write. I get this sort of high about doing that because I'm in flow state.
There's a fear of going out there and doing what we feel we need to be doing, but there's this fear that could still be hanging over us, so to speak. So can you please speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, and you're certainly correct about that, Bran. It is there is a certain dread and there's a certain fear, and when things happen, I guess getting to a crisis point is usually, human beings are unfortunately like that. They will wait and wait and wait until we hit a crisis point, and then they're forced to make a decision. And I'm afraid that seems to be where we're at now, where I'll worry about climate change tomorrow. I'll worry about war or some oppression of some people or whatever. I'll worry about that tomorrow. But the convergence of all these things happening at once, and you're right about the speed with which we can gather information and data from around the world. And as I've talked to people from around the world, I realize that we're all sensing the same pulse. It's not, somebody in the Netherlands is feeling something different than I am, or in the UK, or in Australia, or in India, or in Japan, or any other, Brazil, anywhere else in the world. We all know that this is going on. And this is the part, I think I wrote about this, maybe I wrote about it in the first book. This idea of courage is one of those things where courage is not an absence of fear. It's acknowledging that you're fearful about something, and yet knowing you have an obligation to do something, and you go ahead anyway in spite of that. And I think part of some of these exercises in the book about regulating your emotions and regulating your feelings would go a long way to helping people deal with this fear, right? I think it's helpful to experience it and feel it, because that's one of the things that's will hopefully motivate us to do something to change it, because we're not fearful about some outcome, not likely to change it, because we'll just let it keep going the way it is, right down the river, even if it's going over the cliff. But I think at this point, in this particular juncture, this is what we need to be focused on, is this idea that the fear should not be a barrier to taking some type of action, an action that I think we need to deal with. Now, what I've also found out too, my own personal fears, it was a point in time I never would have thought I could have written a book, gotten in front of people and started to talk to them, done podcasts and things like that. It's becoming easier and easier for me to do because I'm doing it more and more. And the more experience I have doing it, the more confident I feel, and confident I feel doing it. And I think with anything that creates fear, it's facing it, it's going up to it, and doing what you need to do to bridge over the fear into doing some type of action to eliminate whatever it is that's causing the fear. And I think that's where we are now. Highly sensitive people, many of whom are going to be reluctant to get involved with this stuff. They don't want to get their hands dirty, or they don't want to get stressed out about trying to do something big. You don't have to do something great big. You have to do something, even just something small. Your community, your workplace, your family. This is a good place to start socializing the ideas that we've just been talking about trying to make changes in the world that need to happen. Everybody in the world, I believe, that's paying attention understands this. They all know there's got to be some changes done. This is not going to work. It's not sustainable. And we will not survive if we continue doing this. So my suggestion to anybody who's on the edge here about trying to do something like that is take a small step and just keep moving forward with it. As you do that, you'll build confidence. And as you build confidence, you'll be able to do more in helping to make this change come to effect. And I really believe that there'll be a special strength that comes from somewhere. I don't know when we get into the spiritual realm on this, but the idea is it will come from somewhere, and people will attach themselves to that strength and will go for it, because we are hitting a crisis point in the planet's history. And whether HSPs or whether all people come together to start working on this needs to happen.
If there's anything else, feel free.
Well, I would just say what I've been saying just about every single podcast at the end is that if you're highly sensitive, or you suspect that you're highly sensitive, there's a test at hsperson.com. That's Dr. Elaine Aron's site. Take the test. At least it'll give you an idea where you fall, whether you're in the highly sensitive spectrum or not. If you are in the highly sensitive spectrum, learn everything you can about the trait. The more you know, the better you'll be prepared to answer questions from people, and to sort of be able to absorb that and embrace that with yourself. And then once you've gotten educated, do embrace it, because we need, like I've said many times, we need all HSPs on deck right now. This is a big moment for us, I think. And I think we could affect some change in the world that, or at least be in a position to help others see what we're seeing.
Thanks again to William for everything he shared with us. Let me know your thoughts. Message me on Instagram at BEnergyAware or leave a comment. You can also get in touch through my website, BEnergyAware.com. Leaving a review on Apple Podcasts is always much appreciated, as well as sharing this podcast with your friends. And if you need support with giving your contribution to the world, then get my audiobook, Get Empowered, or get in touch with me through my website to book a session. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.